You know what's wild? We see mistakes at every single rank. Some of them are really stupid mistakes, like, oh, okay, this guy is just new here. He just doesn't get it. He'll learn over time. But some of them are the kind of mistakes that you make where you think, this guy has 3,000 hours on the game? That's what we want to talk about today. Not the mistakes that new players make, but the mistakes that we see every single day in every single rank. The mistakes that just don't seem to go away. It's like some players just refuse to learn. We're talking about errors so frustrating and so facepalm worthy that we had to make this video. Trust me, you've probably made at least one of these today. Maybe even in your last match. Starting off with the first one, which is you're just waiting for your teammates to win the game. Players just aren't doing enough. They're just fulfilling the lowest tier aspect of their role. If you're playing Sova, maybe you learned a sick dart lineup and you're using it every single round. Maybe you're using your drone to help your team entry onto site, but you're not actually telling them you're doing any of these things or even waiting for them to be there to follow up on it. More on that later. Maybe you're a controller player though, and you're dropping smokes, but then you're just sitting back holding flank, hoping that your duelist will do all the work. Here's the reality. In matchmaking, you need to do the heavy lifting to win your rounds. You need to be active in the fight. Yes, drop these smokes on time, but also push out and hold them. Get those lurk kills across the map while your teammates are creating all of this pressure. Take this Brimstone on Lotus, for example. He is dropping his smokes for his team to entry B, but then he's just sitting back holding flank. And he's not even watching flank really properly. The A players could easily walk through here without him noticing. Now, during this time, what he could be doing is entering with his team on B and holding the smoke. Or he could be lurking up C, ready to flank through waterfall when the enemies rotate. These are both great options for him, but he's doing neither of these things. From this position, it is very likely that the Brimstone gets zero impact in the round. Remember that there will be rounds where your teammates will win on their own, but if you're not in the front line having an impact or at least lurking effectively, you're going to struggle to win games consistently. Anyway, moving on to mistake number 2. For some reason, some players just can't sit still. Here's the thing, sometimes your position is way more valuable than any kill that you could possibly get. If you've got an awesome flank, but your teammates are too far away to actually create pressure, peeking out is just going to get you killed. Remember, it's really easy to cover all potential threats when nothing is going on, so the chances of you landing a sneaky flank when the enemy team isn't fighting is incredibly low. You're probably just going to peek into 3 enemies staring at you. Now, the best thing that you could do is just don't die. And the best way to not die is to not peek. You want to wait for the perfect moment to strike, and normally that's going to come when your teammates are taking contact. If you're in a really good spot, and even if the enemy team knows that you're there, you want to let that tension build. Don't give them the chance to relieve the pressure by killing you. If they know you're on flank, they're going to be worried about that. So while your teammates are fighting them on site, they're going to have 1 or 2 players just constantly worried that you're going to peek out and kill them. That pressure in itself is incredibly valuable. Remember, it's not always about how you peek something, it's about when you peek it. This applies to coordinated sight hits as well. If you're waiting on a Sova dart or a KO flash to refresh, one of the worst things that you could do is peek out and die before that utility is available. Does anyone remember that Sentinels round on Icebox B site from VCT? The one where they're all hiding, nobody's peeking, they are just waiting. And then boom, they all peek out together and take down the operator. A really cool thing happens when you wait in Valorant. Notice how Sentinels goes from the beginning of this clip having 3 enemy players on B site to suddenly only having 1 player by the time that they peek the Jet. They hardly do anything. They just sit there and they wait. But because Jet is re-clearing this with an operator right now and doesn't see anything, to Gen G this looks like they've rotated out. They wait here so long that Gen G pulls off not only the Killjoy, but the Viper from B site as well. And they did all of this by doing nothing. In matchmaking, this could never work. We know what usually happens. Someone gets impatient, peeks, and dies, and then someone is like, I gotta trade them, so they peek, and then they die now too. Sometimes doing nothing, though, is the best play. Wait for your team's utility, wait for the correct timing, and then go together. And then when you go, make sure that your movement is sharp. You don't want to just swing the angle like this. You want it to look like this. Movement is one of the most important aspects of Valorant, and while a lot of players hyperfixate on their aim, trying to make sure they can click an updrafting jet out of the sky, the reality is, for most players, their movement just sucks. Luckily for you, we can help you fix that with our Movement Master in Minutes course over at SkillCapped. This course is designed to teach you everything you need to know about getting good movement in Valorant, all in under 20 minutes. We break down each mechanic into bite-sized, easy-to-understand videos so that any player, no matter their rank, can get godlike movement. Don't just take my word for it though, we're actually so confident we'll get you moving like a menace, we offer a rank improvement guarantee. So if you don't climb, you don't pay. We do this because our service works. Check it out using the link in the description for a discount if you're serious about climbing in the coming act. And other than that, let's take a look at mistake number 4. Now, for some reason in the games that I watch, sometimes it feels like players are in a race to end the game. Have you ever noticed that? Like they're just rushing A or rushing B every single round? Now, it may surprise you to hear, but mid control is pretty crucial on a lot of maps. Take Abyss, for example. A lot of you are maybe struggling on Valorant's newest map. On Abyss, rotating through spawns is uncomfortable for both sides, and mid control can give you a huge advantage. Look how long the walk is when you're forced to go through spawn. And even when you've made it to site, if you don't have mid control, now you're worried about getting picked off as you try to push in. It's horrible. And then if you want to risk it and push through mid, there's all sorts of lurk potential. I know fighting mid on Abyss can feel kind of funky for both sides though, so here let me help you out a little bit. As a defender, when you look at the spawn barriers, does anything stick out to you? If you notice the spawn barrier on B is quite far back, you're likely picking up on what I'm putting down. Now, although in mid, you can technically get peeked from both sides, you can't actually get peeked from the right side for a bit since attackers need to start so far back. Because of this, it actually means that you can walk up the right side of mid pretty effectively if you have someone holding above you. This can be an operator player, a rifle, or even just somebody jump peeking. You can also use a smoke here to help out a bit. For some agents, walking down here makes more sense. Like Yoru, for example, can place a TP and spawn, walk up the right side, and look for a pick. For some agents, it probably doesn't make as much sense. Like you won't often see a Sova doing this sort of thing. But the Sova can help somebody else do this. And that's where the teamwork part comes into play. I know there's a lot of angles to worry about in mid, but by understanding where you can and can't be peeked from right away, it can help take mid control a lot. Similarly, for attackers, it can actually be pretty easy to walk up the left side of mid due to the bookshelf blocking off the most natural angle to hold mid from. By smoking off the right and then walking up the left, it becomes very difficult for the B-Link player to know if someone is closing in on them. They can't possibly watch both angles at once, so it oftentimes will force them into a much more uncomfortable position. That's just a little bit to help you out on Abyss though. Mid is important on other maps as well. Ascent, Split, even Icebox, you shouldn't completely ignore mid. Try your best to understand these maps that you're playing on and play to their strengths. Moving on to our 4th mistake, and this is a big one. Players burn their utility too early without optimizing it. Remember, most utility has really short-lived value. Think about it. A flash blinds for a second or two. A Sova dart might only last a moment before it's shot. If you want to get the most value out of your abilities, you need to use your utility right before your teammates are able to capitalize on it. Take for example this common Sova dart players use on Ascent. The barrier drops and you dart on tree for your team to rush. The problem is, even when rushing, your team won't always reach the choke in time before this dart gets shot. There's no pressure on any of the defenders at the start of the round. Instead, try to dart right here as your team is about to flash out of the choke. Now the enemy needs to choose between shooting the dart or shooting the players coming out at them. The same thing applies for flashes. If you flash an angle and nobody is there to swing off of it, that flash's value is essentially wasted. Flashes are one of the strongest pieces of utility in the game and sometimes can result in 2 or more kills. That's the difference between a well-timed flash though and a poorly timed one. If you poorly time your flash, by the time it fades, the enemy team will have 4 people just staring there at you. This is one of the reasons that Initiator is considered one of the hardest roles in the game. The timing of your util needs to be so perfect to actually get value out of it, and you really need to learn to communicate with your entry players so they are able to capitalize on it. Otherwise, you'll basically just be throwing flashes for no one. This tip isn't just for initiators though. Duelist entry way too early before utility is used for them. If you're satcheling out before the flash, you're doing it wrong. Players will use stall utility before the enemy team is even there to get stalled. I have a cool little trick for you guys if you're never certain about when you should use your mollies and stuff. The easiest signifier for when to use stall utility is to wait for the enemy to use utility of their own. If they rain a blind, for example, that is an immediate sign that they are about to come out. So if you hold your molly out and wait for that Reyna blind, the moment they throw it, you molly, and now suddenly the Reyna is swinging in front of the molly and her whole team is caught behind it. You can use the same rule for flashes, recons, and smokes, basically pretty much every utility that you use to mess up and execute. And when doing it this way, you can ensure that you'll never use your utility too early. It is still possible to use it too late when you do this, but that is a different issue. Finally, our last mistake comes down to players just never playing or coordinating a retake. This happens all of the time. Players think they can hold a 5-man push alone, especially those duelist players who think they are the king of the world. They'll sit on site and get run over every single round, rarely actually getting any kills. The thing is that every agent in your comp serves a purpose in a retake. If you're a Jet and you die on site trying to anchor alone, you've just made your teammates retake 10 times harder. Same goes for a breach. Sure, you've got a lot of utility to try and fight, But if you're alone, that utility might be better used in a coordinated retake instead of wasting it trying to solo hold site. Remember that Valorant is kind of a numbers game. 5 players stunned is still 5 players shooting at you. You're almost never going to hold off a 1v5 push alone if the enemy team is semi-competent. So if you're not in a position to anchor site with a teammate, sometimes it's best to just fall back and play retake. And by play retake, we mean coordinate a retake with your team. Wait for everyone to arrive, not just one player, wait for the whole team to get there, and then just dump util onto site and go. We see people attempt retakes all the time with 2 players rather than waiting for the other 3 to get there. Don't perform 2 individual retakes, do one really strong one. Now I know guys, sometimes you might need to play anchor and look for a pick or 2. This could be because you've used up all of your utility, or maybe your team just doesn't have great weaponry. But in general, coordinating with your team is going to be the key to winning that round. Remember that you don't have to 1v5. Just look at the map and see if you can create a plan to win the round. Alright though guys, before we wrap this up, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5 division rank up guarantee, and we think that is a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like your local gym membership promising that you'll get ripped. Your gym would go bust if they offered you that. Not us though, we've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well in fact that we're able to offer by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. With over 1,000 guides curated into over 50 courses, no one else can compare. We also offer subscribers direct access to our coaches in the Discord so they can get personalized feedback tuned just for them. If you guys are serious about ranking up, then I highly recommend that you check out SkillCapped using the link in the description below. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.